coming carrying aid, vitally needed aid into the city, and this is the first really big convoy we've seen since the tsunami struck. Now I don't Hi, this is Tony Cheng live in Palu in Sulawesi, Indonesia. And this is the point at which the tsunami struck 7 days ago. And if we just look to the left here, we can see in the distance the beach. And this is where it hit the coastal wall. And we can pan back in the distance. You can see a fishing boat has been washed up onto the shore. In the far distance there's a broken warehouse, and then over here on the right hand side you can see some of the houses that have been pretty much completely obliterated. In the distance over here there's the wreckage of a small truck. There are several others buried even deeper than that. The power lines have all been torn down, the palm trees. And what's making it very clear to us, obviously you can't see this at home or smell, is that every once in a while the whiff of what's a body comes. Clearly there are still victims of the tsunami buried underneath. But what's also very pressing at this stage is the plight of those that are still alive, those that survived. You can still see here there's a long line of traffic going into Palu city. Now we were speaking to a couple of women who were here a little while ago, and they were saying that even though this area was the worst hit by the tsunami, all of the aid at the moment is going right into the city itself. We've just seen a convoy heading in that direction of about 10 trucks, 10 shipping containers going into the city. Each container was accompanied by an armed policeman, and that'll be going into the city. But the other problem is there just isn't enough of it. We were down at the port a short while ago and we saw one ship come in. There was one that came in yesterday, and it's just not getting the aid distribution that's needed. Now we can cross over the road a little bit. Somebody letting us pass very kindly. And we'll just have a look here at the bay and give you a sense of how this tsunami happened when the earthquake, which hit at about 5 p.m. last Friday evening, triggered a huge wave that came rolling down this channel here. And you can see this is a very narrow channel that goes down the coastline, and as it came in, it battered into the seawall here. This was a shipping area, communities of fishermen living here, and then into Palu city, which is right at the end. There's a liquid gas container ship over there, which has been partly pulled off its moorings. Just you can see here these buildings. The only thing that really remains are the foundations themselves, and the power of this thing must have been fantastic. Down here even, the reinforced steel that were part of the foundations of this just torn aside. Two ambulances heading up the coast. We've seen search and rescue teams operating all along this coastline, but it is a huge task. Yesterday we were with a group in one village who were still searching with their hands. Now, part of the problem there was that they didn't have heavy equipment, but while this remains a search and rescue effort, they can't really go in with the heavy diggers that they need to, and that means that when they come to areas where they think there are survivors, and yesterday, incredibly, they said they were still hearing signs of life in the rubble after 6 days, but they hadn't had any survivors for 2 days, but they were still hopeful of getting people out. But the overseers of that search and rescue effort are saying that tomorrow they're going to assume that everybody has passed away, and that's sadly probably a correct assumption. It would be very hard to survive in any of these conditions. It's fiercely hot at the moment. Anyone who's been trapped will have no water, obviously no food, and will probably have been very severely injured. So those ambulances you saw bursting up were probably going to collect bodies, sadly, and there still remain an unknown number of bodies. The village we were in yesterday, they think as many as 1,000 people could have been buried, but they've only found 22 bodies, 5 survivors. So we may not know ultimately how many casualties, how many fatalities there were in this disaster. At the moment the death toll stands at 1,407, but the Indonesian Vice President has said he fully expects the final count to be well into the thousands. And you can see here again, looking up the coast, just how much devastation there's been. Everything for about 300-400 meters has just been washed away. And again, if you drive back down in this direction to Palu, the whole of the coastline is like this. But people here are also getting really frustrated. It has been 7 days and they've been waiting for the government to bring in aid, and we just haven't seen it. We drove across the mountains ourselves on one of only 2 main roads into this area, and there were convoys of people who had family members, friends inside Palu who said they were desperate, that they desperately needed water and food, but they weren't getting it, so they were bringing it themselves. But that just isn't enough. This was a city of 370,000 people. They need proper organization, they need sustained aid to get them through the next month. Again, the government had said that they thought electricity would be back by the 5th, but you look here at the power lines, and this is going to take months to rebuild, and the electricity workers have said as much to us themselves, that it's going to be maybe a week before some functioning electricity is back in key places, government offices, roads and things like that. But ordinary people aren't going to have anything for at least a month, and many for not longer after that. And it's just food and water. At the moment, when the sun falls, the city goes black. There have been concerns about looters. 3 of the main prisons in this area were broken into. All of the prisoners escaped. There have been looters roaming around fairly freely, although in the last 2 or 3 days we have seen the Indonesian army and the police force much more proactive, going out and securing sites. But I think for many people, after a disaster like this, there is just shock. We can see this gentleman coming in. We've seen a lot of this, people just wandering around, looking, some of them looking at what used to be their homes, some of them just contemplating the utter devastation here. And for many of the people who've gone through this trauma of both the earthquake and the tsunami, and who are now dealing with trying to rebuild their lives, they desperately need government help. And while that isn't coming, many of them are making the choice just to get out as quickly as they can. For CGTN, this is Tony Cheng in Palu, a week after the city and its coastline was devastated by an earthquake and tsunami.